Hello friends, this video on diversity in living world part 12 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Why are living organisms classified? Why did we classify them at all? Why was classification needed? Obviously, since the variety of organisms is huge, there are so many different types of organisms that it is not possible to study about each existing living organism in detail. So what was done? They were grouped into categories so that we can study the behavior of each group. So once we know the behavior of each group, we can know the behavior of each member of that group. The other reason was classifying organisms into groups make it easier to know about different life forms. Now, so let us suppose on one hand, you want to know about 100 different organisms. So knowing about 100 different organisms is more difficult than knowing about 10 different groups. Now, if you divide those 100 organisms into 10 groups, so now on one hand, you have to study about 100 organisms. On the other hand, you have to study about 10 groups. So studying those 10 groups is easier. And by studying those 10 groups itself, you get a rough idea about all the 100 organisms, right? So that is a better way. So classifying organisms made things simpler to know more about different types of life. So that is why the living organisms were classified. Classification helps us to understand the evolution of all life forms to a large extent. So evolution, that means how different types of organisms came into existence. So we see that classification actually happens on the basis of the basic characteristics. And once we get an idea about the basic characteristics, we get to tend to get an idea about which organism evolved from which organism. So we tend to get an idea about that. So when we spoke about evolution in class 10th, I gave you an example. If you have not gone through that video, you can go through that now. So in evolution, I gave you an example that in earlier days, dinosaurs used to be there. Now, later it was found with the help of the fossils that there were certain dinosaurs who had wings. And those dinosaurs with wings gradually adapted themselves over a period of time, and from there these birds evolved. So today we see so many variety of birds, right? So basically those birds were nothing but they were the dinosaurs with wings. So basically we can say that birds evolved, or evolution of birds happened from the dinosaurs. So that ways, when we study classification or when we try to classify organisms into groups, we focus more and more on the characteristics of organisms. Now, when we focus so much on the characteristics, we get an idea about which characteristics gave rise to what all different characters. Scientific naming of organisms is based on classification, right? Because again, we have so many organisms that naming each and every organism is not at all possible. So if we classify them, so at least we can have some idea about, like, for example, when we give the scientific names for a lion, tiger and a leopard. So since all of them fall under the same genus, so the generic name for all of them is Panthera. So scientific naming of organisms also becomes easy if the organisms are classified. So these are some of the important reasons because of which living organisms are classified. Why are the classification systems changing every now and then? As I said, in earlier days, scientists thought that it is good enough to have two kingdoms, plant kingdom and animal kingdom. But then later, with time, scientists came up with new types of organisms which could neither be differentiated as plants nor as animals. So they came up with new classification systems. And even now it is seen that the classification systems keep changing very frequently. So why does that happen? Just think over it. Why do you think the classification system keeps changing? Now, why do we need classification? Because there are so many varieties of animals. So we cannot study about each of them. So why is it changing? Because the variety is increasing every day. There are some or type of organisms which are becoming extinct, which are no more seen, but at the same time there are some varieties of organisms which are new, which were not existing before and they came up now. So now when you have these addition and deletion of organisms in the list, so your classification system also has to change accordingly, right? So one reason is extinction of existing species. For example, earlier dinosaurs were there, but now they are no more. So your classification systems should be such that let us suppose earlier only dinosaurs were there. So in your classification system also you will have a separate group for dinosaurs. But now when the dinosaurs doesn't exist at all, so there is no need for having such a group. So extinction of existing species and formation of new species. So this process of addition and deletion demands a changing classification system every now and then. Okay, let us look at the third one. What do we learn from identification of individuals and population? Now, as I said, whenever we spoke about nomenclature, we said that we cannot name an organism just like that. For that, we need to have some idea about that organism. And how will we have that idea about that organism? By identifying that organism, by studying something about that organism. So now, what do you think do we benefit, or what are the things that we get to know by identification of individuals? Now, for now, let us talk about individuals in a human population. Let us suppose there is one guy whom you don't know. Now, when you start observing that guy, or when you start talking to him, what are the information that you tend to get from him? So, let us suppose this is a population. That means, what is population? It is nothing but group of individuals, right? So, when you pick one individual out of that population, and if you start studying him, if you start talking to him, and if you start extracting information about him, what are the things that you might get to know about him? Maybe some basic information like his name, his occupation, where does he live, his address, or maybe his food habits, what kind of food he eats, whether he is a vegetarian or he is a non-vegetarian or he is an vegetarian, the type of culture which he has, maybe whether whether he is an Indian or he is an American, or what kind of culture he follows. So these are some of the things which you might get to know when you start identifying an individual. Now, different people will have different details. I mean, it is not that everybody will have the same name or everybody will have the same occupation or same address. So different people will have different details. Now, based on now in a population where you have hundreds and thousands of individuals, so now you can group those individuals based on certain characteristics. Maybe let us suppose out of a population of say 1,000 people, maybe 200 of them have their occupation as service, and some 500 of them has their occupation as business, and the remaining 300 have their occupation as they are not working. Currently, they are unemployed. So you can classify the population into 3 groups based on their occupation. So this is how classification is actually done. So identification plays a very important role. So whenever you want to classify a population, identification of an individual who together comprise a population becomes very, very important. So similarities and differences between individuals in a population helps in classification, because classification is all about grouping organisms based on their similarities and differences. So understanding those similarities or understanding those differences is a very important aspect of identification. Let us look at the next one. Given below is the scientific name of mango. Identify the correctly written name. So let us see. The first one is Mangifera indica. The second one is also Mangifera indica. But which one is written correctly? Now let us quickly remember the general rules or the universal rules of nomenclature. So there were some rules which we spoke about, right? So one of them was the scientific name should always be written in italics or it should be underlined. So here if you see, it is written in italics. It consists of two parts. The first one is the generic name. The second one is the specific epithet. So here in both the names, you see both of them are present and they are correct. There was another rule which said that the generic name should start with a capital letter. So here M is capital, and the specific epithet should start with a small letter. So here if you see in the first name, Indica starts with a capital letter, but in the second name, it starts with a small letter. So which one is the correct one? The second one. So this is the correctly written scientific name of mango. So let's see the next. Define a taxon. Give some examples of taxa at different hierarchical levels. So what was a taxon? We have already spoken about it, right? So when I talk about classification, I talk about dividing organisms into different categories depending upon their characteristic. So each of these categories is scientifically known as a taxon. So what is a taxon? Scientific term for categories into which organisms are grouped. So taxon basically represents a rank. So when we talk about a taxonomical hierarchy, each rank or each category is known as a taxon. So give some examples of taxa at different hierarchical levels. Now, taxa can indicate categories at very different levels. As I mentioned this before also, that taxa denotes a category. Now, this category can be at a higher level. It can also be at a lower level. For example, let us talk about the human beings. Let us talk about the biological classification of human beings, right? So, what is the scientific name of a human beings? It is Homo sapiens. So this denotes the species to which human beings belong to. Now what is the genus? Genus is Homo. So this denotes the genus. Now what is the family that it belongs to? That is Hominidae. So this is the family to which human beings belong to. What about the order? So the order is primates. So they are all primates. So after order will be class. So which class it belongs to? Mammalia. That is they are capable of giving birth to their young ones. Next is phylum. They all belong to the phylum Chordata. That means they are the chordates. Chordates are the ones who have notochord. The presence of notochord makes them fall under the category of chordates. And which kingdom they belong to? Obviously, they belong to the Animalia kingdom. So now, when I talk about each of these levels, like this is the lowest level and this is the highest level. But at each of these levels, it indicates a taxa. So taxa exists at different levels. So when I say Homo sapiens, I mean when I am talking about the species, so human beings, they itself define a category. There are many types of human beings, but they all fall under a single taxa. So similarly, when I talk about the genus Homo, so that also denotes a taxa. The family Hominidae, that again denotes a taxa. So taxa defines categories and these categories exist at all different levels. Right? The next one. Can you identify the correct sequence of taxonomical categories? Species, order, phylum, kingdom, genus, species, order, kingdom, or species, genus, order, phylum. So which one is the correct one? That is needless to say because we have spoken about it a lot of times. So kingdom is the highest one. So before kingdom comes phylum. Before phylum will come order and species is the lowest one. So this is correct. The second one you see species is in the middle, but that is incorrect because species is the lowest level. So again here you have species, then genus, then order, then phylum. So this is again a correct one. So these two identify the correct sequence. Illustrate the taxonomical hierarchy with suitable examples of a plant and an animal. So again, the same thing, you need to define the biological classification of a plant and an animal. So when I say a plant, we can take the example of a mango. When I say animal, we can Again, very well take the example of human beings. So here we can illustrate the taxonomical hierarchy. So the taxonomical hierarchy from top will start with kingdom. So kingdom, after that will be phylum or division. So division in case of mango and phylum in case of human beings. Then will come class, then order, then family, genus, and finally species. So what is the kingdom to which mango belongs to? Plantae. What is the kingdom a human being belongs to? It belongs to Animalia. So what is the phylum or what is the division to which mango belongs? It falls under the category Angiosperm, that is the flowering plants. So this will be Angiospermae. What is the phylum under which human being belongs to? They are chordates because they have a notochord. Which class under Angiosperm a mango belongs to? It falls under dicotyledon. Dicotyledon is the one which have got two cotyledons. What is the class for human beings? They fall under Mammalia. What is the order to which a mango belongs to? The order is Sapindales. Similarly, the order for a human being is Primata or the primates. Family for a mango is Anacardiaceae. So it is Anacardiaceae. And family for human beings is Hominidae. What is the genus? That is Mangifera. For human beings, it is Homo. And finally, the species. So the species is Mangifera indica. And here it is Homo sapiens. So here you might find these names quite complicated, but that is how it is, right? As I said, the names are all either in Latin or they are Latinized. So this is the taxonomical hierarchy. So please understand and keep it in your mind, the taxonomical hierarchy, because as we go ahead with the different lessons, like the next lesson would be on biological classification. So there also we will be using these terms very often, like genus, family, order, all these things will be used very often. So please make sure that you understand this concept clearly. So hope this lesson helped you and see you all in the next lesson. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.